What do you mean you say they don't have anything to protect? I think that's an interesting phrase.
Well, the industry has been floundering, really, trying to figure out what to do with kind of unlimited burning and sharing. And as a result, it's changed the economics of the business. The business the big business was always built on, you'd put 8 or 10 things out, and most of them would fail, but you'd have one record, and that one record, and I'll use my example of Island. Island was able to exist and be this creative home for everything from Anthrax to Grace Jones to U2 to Eric B. and Rakim because of U2. And frankly, it wouldn't have worked if it hadn't been for U2, because U2 would come along every 2 or 3 years and put out a record. We'd sell 5 or 6 million copies domestically, and at that time another 6 or 7 million internationally, and that funded everything else. Right. Now that was an independent that was incredibly efficient at doing what it does and very focused and could spend a lot of time on an act like Tom Waits, but a major label isn't able to focus quite as much, and the economics for them really is dependent on that one big record supporting everything else. Well, if your one big record is selling 40 or 50% less than it used to, it means that the economic model doesn't work anymore, and that's what's really been struggling. So what you see now in the big business is mergers, downsizing, a re-examination of really the whole thing, mostly driven by lack of sales, and everybody has probably an idea as where the lack of sales are coming from.
This you mentioned Bright Eyes, and it's been something I tried to sign him many years back now. And ended up speaking to, I think it's Rob at Saddle Creek or whatever the fellow's name is, and quickly realized I don't want to sign this guy. They're doing everything they need to be. They don't need my help at all. Yeah. And yet some of the things that you just said about Island seem to be kind of similar to what they're doing with Saddle Creek. Yeah. That Bright Eyes allows them to release an awful lot of other kind of records that don't sell what Bright Eyes does, do it on their own terms. The fact that they can put out 2 records, different records, through your system at the same time, I can't imagine that happening either on a major label or through a major distribution system.
Well, it wouldn't happen because the A&R guy would say, hey, you know what, you got too much material, you got to make one great record. Or there's not a radio hit here. The other thing that's remarkable about these Bright Eyes records, for example, are there is no radio play. There are very little. Mostly as college play or webcasting or any of that kind of thing. But you're certainly not seeing a Bright Eyes video on MTV every 10 minutes, nor are you seeing it or hearing it on your top 40 or FM station.
He's getting a lot of press.
It's a tremendous press and amazing word of mouth, and justifiably so, because it's some important stuff. But it wouldn't happen in a major system because the experts would have probably said, this is probably not a good idea. You're splitting your audience. They have to make a decision. They'll confuse. There's too much material. There's no hits. That doesn't happen in an indie system because there's nobody to say no.
Well, there are people to say no. You've chosen not to say no. There are certainly distributors out there, I know many of them, that are indie distributors that would have said, don't give us 2 records right now. And I'm certainly not going to mention names, but the fact that you said, well, you gave them the freedom to do that. And did it give you any pause, or at this point do they kind of say you kind of just give them the room they need?
Well, I'll tell you what gave me pause. I thought that was the major battle, but then what we found out is that Connor, who's the driving force between Bright Eyes, also decided that he didn't want to put barcodes on his CDs. Barcodes are the little UPC codes, the little things that when you go up to the register, they scan them, and that's what triggers the sale.
That's a good phone call to get.
He had decided that it destroyed his art, so he didn't want to. He didn't want to have barcodes on his CDs, which would have made the records unretailable. So that was more.
Can I ask how you?
Well, we didn't put barcodes on them. We actually, they have those little what they call top spine things, that little sticky shit
thing you can't get off. Right?
Yeah, the stuff that you have
to cut. You can say shit.
Yeah, okay. You have to cut them, or peel them off, or whatever it is. We got away with doing that, and again, the experts would say probably that you can't get away with just doing that because so much of distribution and the handling of CDs happens at high speed, and CDs shoot down these things at like 5 CDs a second, and the barcode readers have to read them, and then they go off into these little things, and that's how they get out to distribution, and that's how they go to the stores. But somehow it worked, and I don't know of anybody that's complained yet.
Well, and Connor, I suppose, can get away with that. I'm sure there are some artists that might have tried to suggest that to you, and you would have told them perhaps we need to keep a barcode on it.
Well, we came up with some other solutions, so if it didn't work, maybe one of them would have. But that was a little more difficult than the 2 CDs.
I can understand. Well, and it keeps with your mission statement. We talk a lot about missions and values in this program. Your mission statement is give indie labels a distribution system that merges the clout and convenience of a major with the marketing sensibilities of an independent. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Well, I'll start with the first part. The first part is 10 years ago when ADA was created, if you were an independent label, in order to achieve national distribution, you had to go and make a deal with a distributor that was usually regional, meaning that there was somebody that handled the Northeast, there was somebody that handled the Southeast, there was somebody that handled the West Coast. They were all separate companies, and you had to ship them records. You had to get paid by each one individually. There were no systems that told you how many they got, how many they sold, what was happening. It was really, you had to kind of paste it together. So when this group of independent or national independent distributors, of which ADA is one, I guess there's probably 5 now, it was for the first time an indie label could have true national distribution. 3 of these big indie distributors are actually fake indies, including ADA. ADA is owned by the Warner Music Group, 95% by the Warner Music Group and 5% by Sub Pop. RED is owned by Sony entirely, and Caroline is owned by Virgin, which is an EMI company. So there's a couple of true indies, but most of the big indies are actually affiliated or actually owned by the majors. Why is that important and why is that bad? Well, it's important because it gives us abilities to have scalability, which a true indie would have difficult times doing. It gives you some security in collecting money. It means that we get paid first as opposed to last, which most indies get paid. And it provides security for the labels, meaning that if we're collecting their money, they're going to get paid from us, which means they're going to be able to pay their artists. A true indie, if a big company goes bankrupt, is not likely to get paid, which means the label doesn't get paid, which means the artist doesn't get paid. That's the good part of being affiliated with a major. The bad part is some of the things that we talked about. Lots of obstacles, too much of we don't do that here, we haven't done it that way, so we're not going to start doing it for you. Any of that stuff that goes with being in the business for 25 or 30 years, 20 or 30 of those years, it working wonderfully successfully. Certainly this last 5 or 6 years,
not so well.
It's been a model that's been under attack. Right. But, so that's the good and the bad. Right now, I'd have to say that we're in a wonderful position. You asked what's not to protect. Well, if you're Warner Brothers, for example, you've got 25 or 30 years worth of copyrights that now basically everybody is, making 10 copies for their friends, or, being shared openly on the internet on a worldwide basis, not even just a domestic problem, but a worldwide problem. And that's how you make money, is these copyrights. So if you can't get paid on those copyrights, how do you run your business?
Sure.
From an indie label standpoint, it's like, hey, if 50,000 people want my music, I think that's wonderful. They're not quite as concerned about how do I get paid and all the rest of it, because they're still in a position where they're trying to find an audience. Once you have an audience, you try to protect that audience. So you have the indies that look at everything that's happening now as an equaling or a leveling of the playing field, or opportunity to get to where the big guys are, and the big guys trying to protect their position. And it's not that much different even from a retailer standpoint. So you got little stores in the shadow of a Best Buy or a Tower. How do they all coexist? Same thing.